On today's episode of the Stay at Home Nurse Podcast, we're going to look at the 3 top nursing jobs for work-life balance. Welcome to the Stay at Home Nurse Podcast. I'm your host, Deanna Cooper Gillingham. For over 25 years, I've strived to use my nurse credentials to find work that fit my lifestyle. Whether it was raising my 4 children and 3 fur babies, traveling the world, or moving to Mexico and living on the Caribbean Sea. Sometimes I succeeded and sometimes I failed, but I always learned from the experience. Now, I want to help you by sharing what worked and what didn't work. There are so many opportunities out there for nurses today. The Stay at Home Nurse Podcast will inspire and equip you to have a nursing career that is meaningful and supports your lifestyle. Now let's get started. This episode was inspired because I have actually spent the last 2 weeks at my mother's, and I'm recording this on her patio, so I want to apologize in advance. You're probably going to hear birds, cars, and airplanes. We will do our best to edit it out, but you may hear some of these. So because I've had a lot of different positions throughout my career, some of them more flexible than others, I want to go over and review with you my top 3 most flexible and best jobs for work-life balance. Okay, number 1 is the hospital bedside nurse. Yes, you heard me right. Nurses have so much flexibility when they work at the hospital. They usually work 3 12-hour shifts, allowing for a lot of time off and a lot of flexibility. Now let's look at the pros. The pros are that you can work 12-hour shifts, giving you 4 days off a week. Most hospitals have flexible scheduling, so you can schedule the days that you want to work. You only have to fight traffic and commute 3 days a week. You can use less PTO time because you're able to be more flexible with your scheduling. You can schedule your days to work together and have a nice little mini vacation without using any PTO time. I used to do this a lot. I used to work 6 days in a row and then have 8 days off and then work 6 days in a row again. That would allow me to have these little mini vacations where we could go and travel and take a vacation without using any PTO time. And so when I left that position, I had tons of PTO time that I was able to cash in. Now, there are some cons associated with this also, as you well know. For one thing, the schedules are usually made far out in advance, and it can be difficult to change when some last-minute changes occur in your life. Also, you get nothing else done on those 12-hour work days. Another option that was sometimes available at some of the places that I've worked, although I've never personally done this, was to work Baylor. That was working 2 12-hour shifts over the weekend, usually either Friday night and Saturday night or Saturday night and Sunday night, and that was considered full-time employment and you got full-time wages. The only problem is you're working every single weekend and you only had 4 days off per year, so basically 2 weekends off per year. So it made it a little bit hard if you had to go to a wedding or if your kids did a lot of things on the weekends, obviously. Moving on to number 2 in my top 3 nursing jobs for work-life balance is work from home. I loved working from home. There's a lot of pros. Just a few of them are no commute. You're physically at home with your family, even though you can't really be responsible for small children or you can't really be caring for somebody else. There's just something said for actually physically being home with them, even if you are locked in another room. You can use your lunch and your breaks to get small chores done. I used to be able to throw a load of laundry in right before I started working, and then I'd take a 15-minute break and go down and throw it into the dryer, and then during my lunch, I could fold that laundry and put it away. Also, I could throw something in the crock pot during a 15-minute break. There's a lot of things that you can get done in 15 minutes, so using that plus the half-hour break, I felt like I was able to get so many things done. Another pro is you don't have to worry about having something clean and ready to wear. So things like laundry, making sure you've done the laundry the night before so you have clean clothes to wear the next day. Don't have to worry about that. Also, ironing, making sure your clothes were ironed. Don't have to worry about that either. I'm not a real fan of ironing because I seem to feel like I put more wrinkles in than I take out. But anyway, I digress. Next, you save a ton of money. Just think of all the money that is spent on a car and putting gas in the car, parking the car, transportation to and from, even if you take public transportation or a bus or a shuttle, all that time and money wasted. Clothing, you don't have to go out and buy work clothes. Lunches, your lunches at home, you're not paying for lunches. I truly felt like I saved a ton of money when I was working from home. And finally, time. You save a ton of time. All that time you spend preparing for work, doing your laundry, making sure it's fresh, like we talked about, putting your makeup on, preparing your lunch or your meals or your snacks, and commuting back and forth, along with costing you money, that's costing you time. Now, there are some cons. When I was working from home, I did miss the hands-on patient care. I really loved putting in IVs and doing dressing changes, going into the OR. So I did miss that. I also missed just holding my patient's hand and getting to talk to them face to face. In addition, it can be lonely. You can feel really isolated because you don't have any coworkers there with you. I'm an introvert. This really didn't bother me much, but there were a lot of nurses that feel very isolated and alone, and they just couldn't stand working by themselves all day. Another con is you do still need childcare. A lot of people think that they won't need childcare, but you cannot be responsible for any children. There needs to be another responsible adult who can be watching the children, a babysitter. But even so, if the child is in the home with you, you may be able to hire a teenager instead of actually having to take them to childcare and daycare, and that could save you some money. Another con for a lot of people is that these are mostly 5 8-hour day shifts. And once you're used to having 4 days off a week, it can be really hard to only have 2 days off a week. In addition, most of these jobs are not as flexible with their scheduling. You usually work Monday through Friday, so you need to use PTO time for things like doctor's appointments instead of just scheduling yourself around these things. So that can be a little bit of a con. Another con is a lot of people that work from home tend to overwork themselves. It can be really tempting to run in and check your computer for emails at night, or want to go in and just start something so that you'll have a head start on it in the morning, but it's really not a good idea. One of the things that I was really good about was I opened my door to my office when it was time to start working, and I closed and locked my door when I was done, and I never went into that room for any reason at any other time. And that kept me from the temptation, and I also completely shut down my computer, by the way, and it took a long time for it to start up. So that took away that temptation of, let me just check and see if any emails came in, or let me see if that phone call came in that I was waiting for before I left. It can be very tempting. I know a lot of nurses who work from home, and they can kind of let that work-life balance kind of intermingle and creep into each other, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of having work-life balance if you're constantly working. And that kind of leads into the last thing. Most employers who will let you work from home will want you to have a dedicated workspace to work from. Remember, we still need to maintain HIPAA compliance. And whether you're making phone calls or whether you have things on your computer screen that have protected health information on them, you need to make sure that nobody else has any access. They cannot hear what you're saying, and they cannot read what's on your computer. So for that reason, along with others, most employers want you to have a dedicated workspace to work from. And finally, moving on to number 3 of my top 3 nursing jobs for work-life balance is my current job and my favorite job, entrepreneurship. Okay, it's really not technically a job, but it is a job. I work harder now than I ever have, but I also have more fun. I honestly don't consider it work. And so I have a big problem right now with that work-life balance just because I tend to enjoy my work so much that I let it creep into my time that I should not be working. But I digress once again. Let's talk about the pros. First of all, you have the most flexibility because you are 100% in control of your time. You get to decide what you're going to work on, when you're going to work, where you're going to work. You create your own schedule. You can take time off whenever you want, and you can work from anywhere. Now, that being said, that is because that is the type of business that I created for myself. Not all businesses are created equal. For example, if you start a home care agency and you're going to be actually going out and doing visits, then obviously, if you're not there, you need to make sure somebody else is there that can handle those visits for you. So entrepreneurship in and of itself is not necessarily the key. It is creating the type of business that fits your lifestyle that is the key. So I want to talk about a few pros really quick. It is definitely the most flexible. I can create my projects that I will be working on and decide when the deadlines are. And although I do try to overextend myself, I don't have to do that if I don't want to. I can create my own schedule. I get to wake up when I want. My goal was to not have to set an alarm clock. So I don't set an alarm clock. I wake up and I have my morning routine I go through, and then I start my day. Now, I do have my list of things that I need to get done. So the earlier I start, the earlier I can finish. But to me, that's important, not having to set an alarm clock. Also, I can take time off whenever I want. When things opened back up and we were able to leave, I was able to get my mom a flight. I didn't have to check with anybody. I didn't have to worry about, I had to check with myself, I should say that, make sure I could fit this into my schedule. And we did work around my schedule, but I didn't have to ask my boss if anybody else was on vacation. I didn't have to worry about switching with somebody else. There wasn't a schedule that was already out that I needed to change or beg somebody to take me off of. So a lot of flexibility with creating your own schedule. Also, you can take time off whenever you want. I'm working right now because I have a deadline for a book that I want to get published, but it's my deadline. I created that deadline because I want to get it out to my people that need it as quickly as possible. If I wanted to, I could have taken time off, but I'm able to work from here. Like I said, I'm recording this podcast from my mother's porch, and again, I apologize for the audio quality, but it's the best I can do right now. Now, all that being said, there definitely are some cons. One of the cons is I can't just call in sick or just call in and say I'm taking a vacation and knowing that there's somebody stepping in for me. I need to make sure that there's time in my schedule to do this, and I need to allow for that. Also, there's a steep learning curve. We don't learn entrepreneurship in nursing school. So there were a lot of things that I had to learn, and that took an investment of both time and money. So you don't usually start making money right away. You really need to invest some time, and then you start to reap the rewards later. Also, the type of business that you create will determine how much freedom and flexibility you have. So before creating a business, you have to know what are the most important things to you, and making sure that the business you have, that you are creating, will get you those things. Another thing is you take all of the risk, but you get all of the rewards. And lastly, it's not easy. I don't want anybody to think that this was something that was easy. Every day there are challenges, and there are some days, just like when you worked at the hospital, that I'm wishing I could quit, but I don't, because again, I really love what I do. I love getting to decide, what am I going to do today? Am I going to record a podcast episode, or am I going to work on my book, or am I going to have meetings today? It's all up to me and what I feel like doing that day, and I love that flexibility, and I love that freedom. Okay, that's a wrap on this week's episode. I appreciate you sticking through to the end, especially with that airplane that decided to fly over at the end. And I'm really curious, what do you think about my list of the top 3 nursing jobs for work-life balance? I would love to hear if you have found another job that should be on this list. I'd be happy to continue the conversation with you in our Facebook group, the Stay at Home Nurse Podcast Facebook group, or on our website, thestayathomenursepodcast.com. Click on the podcast tab, find this week's episode, and leave me a comment. And while you're there, you can sign up for our emails so you'll be notified every time a new episode is out, or you can go ahead and subscribe to the podcast using your favorite podcast app. I look forward to talking to you again next week.